Marvel Phase 4 has reached its end. The Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special was the last project for Phase 4, and since Phase 4 has been out, there has been a lot of criticisms for this phase, ranging from poor writing choices, bad CGI, and really underutilizing some characters. Especially since the pandemic hit while Phase 4 was coming out, which just delayed everything and shifted the release dates for a lot of projects. And because of all these pushes, it kind of caused a little bit of mayhem when it came to where everything stood in the MCU and timeline and where everything took place. But since Phase 5 is on the rise, I think it's time to talk about what problems came from Phase 4 and, hopefully what we can fix going into Phase 5 and how Marvel can improve from this error. We will start with each project, starting from WandaVision and then making our way through all the Phase 4 projects, talking about problems with those shows or movies, but not being too negative, and also talking about the good stuff. I will put timestamps in the description below so you can jump to whichever project you want to start at or listen to my semi-review/problem talk. Then we will wrap things up with an overall Phase 4 criticisms and talking about what we want to see in Phase 5. So let's begin everything wrong with Marvel Phase 4. Welcome to NonStopAntonio, where I talk about everything nerdy. I love Marvel, DC, and anime, and if you do too, I hope you enjoy this video. We start off Phase 4 with WandaVision, which, honestly, WandaVision was interesting. It was something new, and it really showed us how Phase 4 was going to be different from the other phases. Every episode was a unique style, referencing some of the older ways sitcoms were done in the past, going through the ages until we got up to present day. I think one of the biggest problems and letdowns from the show was that the Ralph Bohner was a complete joke for Evan Peters' Quicksilver. They honestly should have kept him as Quicksilver from another universe that got stuck in ours because of Wanda making the change to reality. I also find it really weird that Doctor Strange or none of the other big characters came to the town to see what was going on, and why they all kind of took a back burner to Wanda controlling this town for weeks and villainizing herself. However, I do feel like they dealt with Wanda's mental health pretty well during this, really showing us the aftermath of Endgame, which was nice, and it was like one of the shows that actually took place directly after Endgame, which was good because I think we needed that. It was cool to see Scarlet Witch become Scarlet Witch. Now let's move on to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which honestly was pretty cool when you come think about it. Sam as Captain America is fantastic. If you've ever read a comic, his run as Captain America is really cool, and it's really political as well, really showing what it's like to be a black man as Captain America, and I think the show portrayed that part pretty well. However, I think that the show should have either had cut episodes or just been a movie, because one of the things I found is that some of the story felt like it was going too slow, so there should have been more in it. Like, I think a flashback to show Isaiah Bradley as him hunting down the Winter Soldier would have been cool to see, and something that added to the story a lot more. And I feel like we spent too much time with Sam and Bucky kind of not doing anything, but I did like Bucky going around and dealing with his past and getting therapy for everything that he's done. Also, the Flag Smashers were kind of a bad villain, and I think they probably could have done a better job with a better villain. I didn't like what they did with Sharon Carter either. She shouldn't have become the power broker and should have been just Sharon Carter working undercover or something else like that. I've seen people complain about the politics on the series and how it's too on the nose. However, I don't think that's the case. With the comics, it's exactly the same. Sam deals with a lot of political issues, being Steve's replacement in a way, and I just think that the show did a good job with that, and they should keep continuing that trend, because Sam is going to have a lot of struggles with how people react to him being Captain America now. Sam becoming Captain America was easily the best part of the series. I wish it happened sooner, before the last episode. And John Walker, U.S. Agent, was also a really good part in it, showing how the serum can actually turn someone a little bit mad, and really shows how one soldier can follow the government's orders and then get betrayed by his own government. In addition to that, you also have Sam and Bucky's relationship, which I really like, and I cannot wait to see more of in the future. I really hope in Captain America 4 we do get more Bucky, but however, I feel like we're not going to see him in Captain America 4 because he's going to be in Thunderbolts. Unless Captain America 4 sets up Thunderbolts. But we will see, because we still have time before those projects come out. Now it's time for Loki, and I think Loki did a really good job at showing us the multiverse, introducing us to the TVA. But I think the issue with the TVA is that they introduced a lot of inconsistencies. Like, we have the past Gamora running around in present day, yet the TVA didn't come to get her and stop her. They didn't help with Thanos at all, and he was out of time. They didn't stop the Avengers from going and plucking all those stones. I mean, technically you can say that they put the stones back so they didn't change the timeline, but then you have Steve, who stayed in the past with Peggy, which effectively changed the timeline as well. Introducing something like that also gave you all the inconsistencies with time travel and kind of messes stuff like that up, which is understandable. Whenever we get into time travel, it gets very, very confusing. So it's hard to keep track of everything, but I did like the story with Loki going around, meeting his variants, introducing us to variants, and having a fun adventure. But I still enjoyed both characters, and I cannot wait for season 2. Also, it's like the only season 2 so far other than What If that we're getting. And that's just a whole nother issue I'm going to talk about later. Now for the first movie of Phase 4, which would be Black Widow. And honestly, Black Widow could have been good, which is very disappointing because I like the character. The story was interesting. However, it should have taken place before Infinity War. Yeah, the post-credit scene did have Yelena going to see Natasha's grave. However, I don't think they should have put that in this movie, and it should have been put in Endgame, so Black Widow could have come out before that. However, they didn't do that, and they put it way after Endgame, which it just didn't feel like it fit in that phase, and it shouldn't have been there. At least the post-credit scene set up Hawkeye, which not a lot of shows were setting up other shows in this phase. Plus, there was poor CGI throughout all of it. Some of the writing was a little bit questionable, and they ruined Taskmaster. Like, if they wanted to make Taskmaster the guy's daughter, I don't think that she should have been mute. I think she should have been the comedic Taskmaster that everyone knows from the comics, just a gender-bent version of him. Which I really hope that they do bring in Taskmaster, the comedic one, into the MCU, because his character is really good and he learns from photographic reflexes. He doesn't have a chip in his head that tells him what to do, which I think would be a lot better than what we got. And I think the reveal was really underwhelming that it was the guy's daughter that Black Widow apparently killed, and that they should have changed it. She was just using the identity of Taskmaster, and then the real Taskmaster was revealed in the post-credit scene or something. Because you can still keep this character around, but now I don't understand why they're bringing that Taskmaster back for Thunderbolts, because it just wasn't that good, and I don't really want to see that character again. Meeting Red Guardian was fun, but again, he feels like a one-off that should kind of stay a one-off. We didn't really need him in Thunderbolts as well. The best part about Black Widow was introducing us to Yelena Belova, because I really like her character, and I just really like Florence Pugh, so it's nice to see her in the MCU, and it's nice to see this is where she got her start. I wish Black Widow got better treatment in the MCU, and that we could have got a solo movie before she was killed off, which would have been a lot better than something afterwards. Now, for the next series, we got What If, which I think was a really cool concept that really brought stuff to the MCU. However, it didn't really do anything other than introducing the multiverse, which I think was the whole point. Now, the cool part about this was the fact that it was the multiverse showing us different Earths where different events happened, which I think is exactly what If should do. But the only thing they didn't need to do was make it a big final fight where they all got together like the Guardians of the Multiverse and fought Ultron. Like, it didn't need to be like that. I think it should have just been its own standalone series, each episode being different, no connection, and just having cool little episodes we can go watch that has nothing to do with the main MCU. And then in the movies or whatever, they can treat it like they go into another universe and they meet one of the characters, like how we kind of met Captain Carter in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Even though it wasn't the same one for them What If, it still was cool to be introduced in What If and then see a live action version later down the road. Regardless, I am looking forward to season 2. However, I just hope they don't do like each episode leads into a final fight again, because it doesn't need that. Then we have probably one of the best Marvel movies from Phase 4, and that's Shang-Chi. I really don't have any complaints about this movie because I thought it was really good. It was a great origin for a new character. It was its own standalone thing that didn't really need to be connected to anything else. Because honestly, we don't know when this takes place after Endgame. I'm pretty sure it takes place after Endgame anyways. And it had great fighting choreography. That bus scene is still probably one of my top scenes of the MCU. And the whole villainous part with his father was really interesting. However, I just don't think it needed a giant CGI battle at the end. Even though that CGI battle was really cool, which really showed us this new realm with the dragon and all these different creatures, I just wish it was a little bit more grounded for Shang-Chi, but it was still really cool, and I am looking forward to seeing where he comes back in the future, and I'm just worried that we won't see him for a while. Then we got Eternals that came out in November of the same year, and it's a really cool concept. Introduced us to the MCU cosmic side, introduced us to the Celestials a little bit more, and brought all this stuff into the MCU. However, it felt like it didn't matter, if that makes sense. Because we got the Celestials. However, after this movie, no one mentions the giant Celestial sticking out of the Earth. No one mentions the giant Celestial that pulled the Eternals from Earth while standing over it, because everyone could see that thing in the sky. So it just feels like the events of that movie didn't matter at all. And on top of it, we don't know when we'll see them ever again. We are going to see them at the end because we do see Star Fox, but I feel like there's still a lot that has to happen for us to get there, because none of the movies coming up are going to be able to have these characters in it. It just doesn't feel like. Feels like they set up a sequel, and we won't get the sequel for years to come. This movie also felt too long in a sense. It wasn't as long as Endgame, but with the amount of stuff they pushed into this film, the amount of exposition, it just felt like this movie was a lot longer than it really was. It also felt like there was just a lot of stuff they threw at you because they needed to build these characters from the ground up and introduce them where they were and why they're on Earth. However, I said it didn't really get mentioned in the MCU. At least it got the tiniest reference in She-Hulk for the Celestials sticking out of the sea. There's also way too many characters in the Eternals where it just feels like they're not going to really fit in a movie with the Avengers, and that they'll always be their own thing, kind of just doing their own thing in space now and not connecting to everything else. However, we will see in the future because we just don't know much yet, because in this phase, everything felt standalone and didn't really connect to one another. The next series, which is honestly one of my favorite series, even though it wasn't the best, it was still one of my favorite from the MCU, which is Hawkeye. I really loved the introduction to Kate Bishop. I loved her story. I liked the more humor side of Clint, and I liked seeing Hawkeye be more Hawkeye rather than him being just with the Avengers. I think he deserved a solo project in the past as well, just to really show us his backstory a little bit more. I really liked how he was training Kate to be the next Hawkeye, even though he said no at first, he eventually said yes, and she kind of joined his family in a sense as his protege. And I had a lot of fun during the series as well. The only thing I am a little bit annoyed with is that they kind of adapted the Matt Fraction run, but also didn't at the same time. Like, they took the tracksuits, they took the car, but they changed a lot of the story. And the tracksuits were fun. I liked them in this show. However, I don't like the fact that Kingpin was like the main villain and that he got beat so easily by Kate. Like, of course, he underestimated Kate and he paid for it, but it shouldn't have happened the way it did. Echo also felt like she was underutilized in that show and should have been a little bit more, or saved for her own series, and then we got her backstory, and then, like, we didn't need to get introduced to her. She could have just been there. I did find it interesting how they changed her backstory, how in the comics, Daredevil was the one that was framed for killing her father, but this time Hawkeye is the one that killed her father in his whole Ronin arc, which I still wish we got to see more of the Ronin arc, which is what I was hoping for from the series, and we didn't get to see as much as I wanted to. I also loved Yelena Belova coming back and having fantastic chemistry with Kate Bishop. I want to see both Florence Pugh and Haley Steinfeld work together again because I really like those characters together, and it just worked. Also, one of the worst parts of the adaptation was not changing making Clown the way he was, because in the Matt Fraction run, he was a lot more menacing and evil, and in this, he just kind of felt like a letdown. Because with him and Hawkeye, in the comics, it was a little more brutal when they fought. Like Hawkeye getting stabbed in the ear and becoming more deaf because of the Clown. But at least Kate Bishop is now in the MCU, and let's move over to Spider-Man No Way Home. Because of a Spider-Man fan, I love this. It's one of the best movies as well, and I think it was fantastic. Spider-Man No Way Home is one of my favorite Spider-Man movies, mostly because we got the three Spider-Men together. It introduced us to the Spider-Verse in live action in a sense, and brings back a bunch of cool villains from the other movies. However, even though I love this movie, I can still see its faults. Like, the whole part about the villains being pulled because they knew Peter's identity makes no sense when you think about it, because, yeah, Green Goblin does, Otto does, Lizard, I can't remember if Lizard actually figured that out or not, Sandman knew, but Electro definitely did not know, and Venom, they say it's a whole multiverse thing, which is just kind of a weird explainer to it, and also, the whole Venom post-credit scene was a piss-off, because why bring him in at the end of his movie just to get rid of him? They left the cool symbiote piece so that we can get the symbiote in the MCU, but they shouldn't have just brought him in to, like, put him out. It was just really annoying, and I don't think they should have done that way. Also, bringing Venom in, I thought this was going to be his way of finally donning the Venom Spider-Man suit, where we see the spider symbol on his chest, but then they just got rid of that, so who knows if he's actually going to have that in the third movie. But at least we will be getting Venom most likely going to New York to find a Spider-Man in his next movie. And on top of it, the whole point about saving them was a Peter Parker move. However, by doing that, they pretty much just sent them all back to die, because all these characters were about to die in their universes, so by taking away their powers or taking away the stuff that is bothering them, they're most likely still gonna die. Because Green Goblin was saved right before he died, apparently, which means he's dead. He got back and got shish kebabbed by his glider. There's no way he didn't. Otto was in the middle of drowning and getting killed by his device, which means he would have went back to drowning and died again. Lizard, part was weird. Lizard made no sense because he wasn't dying and he got cured by the end of the movie. Sandman made no sense because he just left at the end of the movie, unless it was future Sandman or something like that. Electro makes sense because he was dying. However, he would have got electrified and died without his electricity powers when he got sent back as well. So it's just weird. And when you say that they all came back before they died, Venom also got pulled from there, but he was just hanging out on a beach. So just weird little inconsistencies with how they were referring to why the villains got pulled from the other universes. However, it was still great to see Toby and Andrew back again. And getting that redemption moment for Andrew Garfield catching MJ as she falls to her death when he couldn't save Gwen Stacy in his world. I thought that was a great moment. Easily one of my favorite from the movie. And we got Tom Holland Spider-Man really becoming that neighborhood Spider-Man at the end of the movie with his new suit, which just looks fantastic. And I cannot wait to see it in live action whenever that's going to be. And I do hope that we get another live-action Spider-Man movie where we get these characters referenced, or we get to see an appearance of Andrew or Toby again. Or Tom making an appearance in Toby or Andrew's movie, if anything ever happens from that. Then we got the Moon Knight series that came out, and I think it started off really great, showing us Mark Spector's DID and really introducing us to who he was as a character. However, I think it got really rushed by the end of the story, and 6 episodes was not enough to cover it. They should have made the series longer, so they could have explained the lore a little bit more and showed more about the Egyptian gods and kind of taught us about the backstory about Moon Knight a lot more. Because it just felt like we got him, we got introduced to it, then Stephen Grant got the Mr. Knight persona, and then we went straight into everything. Everything went to shit, and then the movie ended with this dumbass big CGI battle. Speaking of the big CGI battle, they brought in this big battle, which really wasn't needed. The show relied way too much on CGI, and also one of the biggest problems was the fact that the comics are really dark and gritty, and it felt like they got rid of a lot of that stuff in the show, where the way they were talking about it, we all thought it was going to be dark and gritty, and then in the end, it wasn't that dark and gritty at all. And we were really hoping that this was going to be the change for the MCU, making something a lot darker, but hopefully we'll see stuff like that on the rise. And on top of it, the final scenes with them fighting was really cool, and I really do wish we got that Jake Lockley scene in the end, where he beat up all the enemies, and we got to see that rather than just seeing the brutality afterwards of them slipping in and out of his DID, because I feel like for a final that would have been a perfect scene to show and reveal that Jake Lockley's there rather than just in like an end scene, but it was still cool nonetheless. Which also the final felt a little anticlimactic, but the Jake Lockley at the end was really cool, but who knows when we'll see Mark Spector again, because again, he doesn't fit in any of the projects, just like some of the other characters we've already talked about haven't either. I've also seen a lot of people complain about Moon Knight is a lot different from in the show that he is from the comics, and some people aren't a fan of how they change his character. I haven't read enough of Moon Knight to really make that comparison. I did read the run that the show is based off of. I really enjoyed the run, but I could totally see what people mean. Now we're going to talk about the mess that is Doctor Strange's Multiverse of Madness. This movie had a lot of potential. It seemed like it was being really cool. However, it felt like they changed a lot of stuff, and it felt like it wasn't long enough. It felt like a mess. Like, the concept was cool. Making Scarlet Witch, the villain, was interesting. However, it made her irredeemable. She killed so many people, eliminated the Illuminati like no tomorrow, and really made her seem like someone we could never see as a hero again. Because even though she was trying to get her kids back, everything she was doing was awful. And yes, she was being corrupted by the Darkhold, but it bothered me that we made her such a villain because she's going to come back as a hero, and I don't like what they did. I think that at the end of WandaVision, she should have got to keep the kids and then had to deal with punishment after that. And then in the movie, it was her helping Doctor Strange save her kids after they were taken by Mephisto or something, or someone in the multiverse. I think that would have been a better story than what they did. Also, America Chavez, the way she beat her was kind of stupid, and I liked America Chavez's introduction. However, the way she finished the movie was a little rough. I liked what they did with Illuminati in a sense, because it was cool to get the John Krasinski cameo and kind of get Professor X back, introducing us to Black Bolt again, and seeing all these characters. However, I think the post-credit scene should have been him making his own Illuminati rather than just seeing Bruce Campbell punch himself in the face. But again, the best part of the movie was introducing us to the multiverse, because the multiverse is a really cool concept, and it's really awesome to see the different universes. I think it would have been cooler to see more cameos, kind of see them while they're falling through the universes. We should have seen some other characters. That's the one thing I think they missed out on, and that we all thought this movie was going to be, with like a cameo central movie, because of the fact that it was the multiverse. I'm not too disappointed because that didn't happen. I'm just more disappointed of the execution of the film. Then we get to Miss Marvel, which was honestly one of my most anticipated series, because I read the comics and I loved her character. I really liked how they dealt with her culture and who she was. However, when we got to the show, it didn't sit well with me. I felt like the show started off really strong, but by the end, it got rushed. Every series has had a pacing issue, and this one felt it so much. Because the series started off strong and then felt rushed, I think we went to Karachi way too soon. I don't think that should have happened in the season, especially because it happens way later in our comic book run. Like, it felt like they took 10 volumes of the comic and just shoved it into 6 episodes and cut out so much good story. The villains were kind of shit. Like, the whole point about them being clandestines coming in and then just dying in the end was dumb. And then at the end of the series, the DODC being the main villain, which was just dumb. I didn't like how they changed her powers to be more like Captain Marvel. I think they should have stayed with the stretchy polymorph powers because they're so much cooler. I did not like how they made her a mutant by playing the X-Men theme song. She should be an Inhuman. They should introduce the Inhumans to the MCU, and that's how it should have gone. Because I think it just plays so much more with her character. And the thing is with her polymorph, the first time she gets her powers, she turns into Captain Marvel because that's who she thinks that she should be. A blonde, white superhero. And then she learns to feel comfortable in her own body and be that hero. And I hate that they took that away. Because, like, they did still play stuff of her getting her own identity. Because they took away a bunch of big story points from her comics that would have played so much better if they actually used them. With the Karachi stuff, they introduced Red Dagger way too soon, and I felt like she still had a lot of learning before meeting him that should have gone head down. The best part of the series was Iman. She was Miss Marvel, and I do look forward to seeing more of her in the future, and I still hope that she will get her polymorph powers, and that the bangles are something that's just kind of going to trigger those latent inhuman abilities later on, but we will see. It was cool to see her use the bangles and make them kind of work for her embiggen powers. However, I think it still would have been cool to see embiggen powers with her being stretchy. I hate the comment that people were saying, oh, they just don't want her to look like Mr. Fantastic. That is stupid. Her powers are similar, but not exactly the same at all, and it's a dumb excuse to say for what they did. Then we get to my biggest disappointment of the year, and that is Thor: Love and Thunder. This movie had the potential to be so goddamn good, because you had Gore the God Butcher, who is a fantastic, overpowered villain in the comics, and the storyline that it's based off of is so freaking good. But then Taika just ruined the whole freaking thing by making it a giant joke. I loved Ragnarok, I loved the humor, but I think they put way too much humor in Thor: Love and Thunder for the tones they put into it. Because first of all, Ragnarok happened, and then Infinity War and Endgame, and then Taika just skipped over everything that happened to Thor and Infinity War and Endgame, all that character development of him being depressed, and went straight back into being jokey Thor, which I did not like, and I think he should have been a more responsible person after those movies because of what he learned from both of those movies. Gore the God Butcher should have been a God Butcher and actually killed people rather than killing one god off screen and then not seeing anything else. Like, we should have seen him slaughter gods and take them down. It should have been a way darker movie than it actually was. The whole kidnapping kid storyline was utterly stupid. Like, that did not need to happen. The whole attorney part of it was just a waste. I think that they should have done the God Bomb, introducing us to future and past Thor to help defeat him, giving us the Necro Sword bonded to Thor, and have him beat Gore. I think it would have been a lot cooler than what they gave us. Plus, they completely ruined the Mighty Thor storyline. Like, I love Jane Foster as Thor. I really enjoyed Natalie Portman. However, the whole thing about her becoming Thor in the comics was that no one knew who she was. It was a huge secret, and I think they should have kept that secret until the end of the movie or kept it going afterwards. To really be like, who is this new Thor? Why is she wielding Mjolnir? Who is she? And have this, like, pure mystery around it. Like, we would know as an audience, but the characters wouldn't. Then killing her off at the very end for cancer? Stupid. She had to deal with the conflicting powers of every time she used the Mjolnir, she'd wipe away her chemo, and they dealt with it slightly in the movie, but I feel like they should have kept her around for another movie, or a series, or something along the lines to really show that story and that struggle, and show her being a hero even though she's trying to fight cancer, rather than just killing her off at the end of the movie with cancer, because I feel like it was a really bad way to deal with it, and I don't know who the hell signed off on it. I've also seen a lot of people say that you should watch this movie like Korg is the one narrating it. Which I get, but also it's kind of dumb because he narrates at the beginning, and yeah, it's more humorous and everything, but I don't think that's the way you should have made a fourth movie for a character, especially after Ragnarok, Infinity War, and Endgame. Like, that's something later down the road you do, or like a special, not something that's this big movie. Also, the movie felt way too short because stuff felt very, very, very rushed at certain points. It was still a fun movie in a sense, but I just hate what they did. However, I do like that Thor is a father by the end of it, and that he has that new responsibility. I still think they should have went a different way of doing that, but I am looking forward to seeing his adoptive daughter more in the MCU, which is actually Chris Hemsworth's real daughter. If Chris Hemsworth is coming back, especially with everything that's going on in his personal life right now. Then let's talk about the most controversial show from Phase 4, She-Hulk, which I love this show a lot, and I think it's one of the most rewatchable MCU shows just because of the humor and how you can just kind of watch an episode and it doesn't really matter. But the humor is very subjective, depending on who you are. You might find it funny, you might not. But that's how all comedy is, and I understand why some jokes land and some jokes don't, because not every joke landed with me. I did like how we got to see obscure characters throughout the entire series, introducing us to just random characters in the MCU that are always here, and really widening the amount of superpowered people that are in the MCU as well. One of the biggest criticisms I noticed is people just complaining about no fighting, not her being a superhero, but it's a lawyer show with comedy. Some of the writing is very questionable. However, I still enjoyed it. I really do like how they dealt with some of the characters. I liked how they brought Abomination back, but his story was a little rough. And I do love how they brought Daredevil in. I love the suit. I loved his episode. His episode was the best episode of the season. And it wasn't just because Daredevil was in it. It's because Jen was being a lawyer superhero and getting that superhero pep talk from Daredevil, really learning how to balance both of those things. Because that's who she is. She's a superhero, but she's also a lawyer superhero. So she does a lot of stuff where she's superheroing and also being a lawyer, which I think was done great. Also, Charlie and Tatiana's chemistry was fantastic. Some episodes felt pointless in the series, though. Some of them were a little bit too short or a little rough. The ending was interesting, and I really liked the fourth wall break, but it felt very anticlimactic because she came back and the whole fake fight that was going on was over, and she just went and had dinner with the family. I don't understand why they did to Scar what they did. I was hoping to see more of the Hulk Scar storyline, and it would have been cool to get a little reference to that, but maybe if he gets his own movie, we'll get a flashback or some shit like that, but we will see. But Scar is in the MCU, and who the hell knows when we'll see him next. I think She-Hulk's one of those characters also that can get a sequel season because her show is just kind of like a sitcom you watch and just enjoy. Now, one of the most surprising projects in the MCU that was actually really amazing was Werewolf by Night. They changed up the tone. It was in black and white. The movie was in a completely different style than most of the MCU. And there were still jokes in it, but the jokes worked a lot better with this. It was more horror-y. It had violence. And I think it was a really cool take on these characters and introducing them into the MCU, introducing us to the monster side of the MCU and opening the door for characters like Blade and other monsters to come in. Because this could lead into a Midnight Suns project. This could lead into a lot of stuff. And I don't really have any criticisms about this because it was done so well. I was worried about Elsa not having an orange hair, but that could still come in the future. She was wearing the jacket at the end, and Man-Thing was awesome, and I really hope to see more of his character. Then we get into Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which I think was a great send-off for Chadwick because they had to deal with a lot. Chadwick passed away right after they finished writing the first script, which sucks, and they had to rewrite the whole movie to really work around this. And I think they did a good job with what they did. I saw people complaining about the funeral, but I think it set the tone for everything. But one of the things I don't understand, which I agree with some people, is why weren't any of the big Avengers there? They fought with T'Challa, they knew him, and I felt like by that point in time, they would have had a good relationship with him. However, none of them were there. Unless they just had the funeral and didn't tell anyone that he had died until after they buried him. But we don't really get that context in the movie. And I think it would have been cool to have like not even a cameo, but just a reference somewhere being like, the Avengers sent their condolences or something like that. Something to kind of tie him to the other characters who knew and cared about him as well. The movie did look stunning, and I think that everything in this was really cool. The only thing I didn't like about this with look-wise was Riri's Ironheart suit in the Wakandan suit. It looked bad. I hated it. I am looking forward to seeing her get a proper suit, though, in her own series. However, some of the characters in this movie did make stupid decisions. Like, why did they fight Namor in the middle of the ocean when he can kill everyone easily in the middle of the ocean with all his people? Like, that was kind of a stupid choice on Wakanda's part. Also, when Ross gets taken at the end of the movie and saved because he's being arrested for treason, if Wakanda broke him out and took him back to Wakanda and the US got a hold of that, they would go after Wakanda because that is an act of war. And I don't understand why they would think that's okay. Also, after what Riri did, blowing up the cop cars and everything else while they were escaping the cops in Chicago, she would definitely be arrested on the spot as soon as she got back to America. It was kind of weird and still kind of poor writing choices, but the movie was still really good. On top of everything as well, Namor's plan to kill Riri was kind of dumb because him killing Riri wouldn't have stopped the United States from making more of those machines or finding someone else to do it. But I guess it's also him looking strong in front of his people, showing that he's going to stop the other countries from building these machines, and that was their way to show his people that he's stronger and he's not going to take anything and let the other countries walk all over them, if that makes sense. I still think the movie was done really well. It's easily one of the top 3 MCU movies from Phase 4. There is obviously going to still be inconsistencies because stuff had to be changed after Chadwick passed away. Except Shuri is now the Black Panther, which is kind of cool, and I think at the end of the movie, M'Baku's going to be king now, I guess. But who knows until we either get the Wakandan series or we see more about Black Panther, Shuri in another movie with some other characters. But I'm looking forward to finding out more and interested to seeing how this moves forward because I think it's going to start a war with someone with Wakanda and everyone going after the vibranium. But then we finally get to the final project of Phase 4, and that is the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. The specials, back to back, are the best stuff out of the MCU so far in Phase 4, and it was done really well. There was no big bad. It was just a fun holiday special with Drax and Mantis having an adventure on Earth, which honestly is all I needed. We need more projects like this where we have our characters doing fun stuff, no big bad, just kind of a fun adventure for them to go on, and just being a wholesome movie. And this movie was great because it introduced Cosmo for the next movie as well, which I love. I love Cosmo, and I cannot wait to see her in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Otherwise, I don't really have any big criticisms for this project. I think it was done great, and it's like a nice holiday special you can watch around the holidays now, and you don't really need to know anything prior to the MCU to watch it. You can just watch and have a good time. Now it's time to talk about all the problems with Phase 4. So one of the biggest things is I see people complaining how nothing feels connected, which is kind of true. And also the fact that Guardians and Werewolf by Night didn't connect to the MCU as a whole. However, I kind of disagree because Guardians sets up Volume 3, introducing us to Cosmo and also saying that Peter Quill and Mantis are siblings. And then Werewolf by Night sets up the monster side of the MCU, so they have an opportunity to introduce us to the Midnight Suns, Blade, and stuff like that. The more supernatural things that aren't just magic. But then with introducing us to all these characters from these movies that don't feel connected, then you have the fact that we probably won't see a lot of them for years to come. Like, the one issue I have is I don't want to see an Eternals or Shang-Chi sequel literally 6 years later like we did with Doctor Strange, because it felt so disconnected. Even though Doctor Strange was in Infinity War and Endgame, his story that continued after his first movie just kind of got ignored. Baron Mordo going after all the sorcerers being like, no more sorcerers, they kind of just forgot about that storyline. So I really hope that doesn't happen with Shang-Chi or Eternals, and we get them back sooner, or a better sequel before the end of Phase 6. Then on top of it, like characters like Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, and Hawkeye, the Kate Bishop version, could all get a second season. However, we don't know if it's actually going to happen. Like She-Hulk easily, more sitcoms. Moon Knight, bring back Jake Lockley, show us a new story. Miss Marvel, continuing her story after the Marvels movie. And then a Hawkeye story centered around Kate Bishop and her learning to be a hero by herself. I think would be really cool, but who knows if, I don't think we'll ever get that so far. The only sequel series we're getting is Loki Season 2 and What If Season 2. On top of it, a lot of problems with the phase is that we don't know when anything takes place. WandaVision, Falcon, and the Winter Soldier both take place soon after Endgame. That one's easy enough to figure it out. Spider-Man No Way Home as well, because it follows Far From Home, which takes place directly after Endgame and then goes into its own movie. Eternals is soon after because they reference the events of Avengers Endgame and how that brings out the emergence. Hawkeye, I think it's either the same year as No Way Home, so the same year, or it's a year later. We actually don't know. Black Panther seems to take place a year and a half after Endgame, because it seems like he came back from being blipped and then went straight into getting sick and dying. Shang-Chi, no idea. We have no idea when it takes place, which is kind of okay because now they can just place him wherever. We only know that it takes place after Endgame because of Bruce's arm and Captain Marvel being involved, and that Bruce was in not Hulk form. It definitely does take place before She-Hulk, though, which we also don't know where it happens in the timeline. Also, all of Phase 4 had a pacing problem. All the projects pretty much had some kind of issue. Either the shows felt really rushed, or they had too much time on their hand, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Most of them just felt too rushed. I think they needed more episodes to really flush out the stories they were doing, rather than kind of compacting it all into 6 episodes. 6 episodes? Stupid. Do at least 8 or 10, and then it will be a lot better of a story. And they don't have to be an hour long each. They could be like 40 to an hour. A little bit better pacing would have been a lot helpful for us as fans to enjoy these series. The one thing, though, that is nice is that we did get the stage set for multiple characters. Shang-Chi, Moon Knight, Kate Bishop, Eternals, She-Hulk, and so on. They introduced us to them, but we don't know when they'll be back. I have a kind of a theory that Kate Bishop will show up at the end of Ant-Man and recruit Cassie for like Young Avengers. Well, Shang-Chi should be coming back in Kang Dynasty apparently because it's the same director, and a lot of people think that's what's going to happen. We have no idea when Eternals were coming back. Miss Marvel will be back in the Marvels, which is nice. The Moon Knight, we have no idea. He's just kind of off on his own thing right now. At least we'll see She-Hulk and Captain America 4. Apparently, that's rumored. We don't actually know yet, but if it does happen, at least we won't have to wait too long to see her again. Phase 4 has really set up these characters that we just don't know when we'll see again, which is kind of annoying. Like I said in the beginning of the video, the pandemic caused a huge problem for a lot of release schedule issues, because I think WandaVision was originally supposed to come out right before Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and it wasn't supposed to be a huge gap. I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier was supposed to be one of the first projects to come out, and because everything got shifted, the timeline just doesn't make sense that way too. And on top of it, Kevin Feige is also split between all these projects, so he's not able to keep everything consistent like he once was, because there's just way too much. There's a little bit of MCU fatigue where you have to keep up with everything, and it's just way too much to watch. I, as a fan, can easily do it, but I understand why some people are getting tired of seeing so much MCU and kind of wish there was less projects to make it easier to consume. Also, we need to help our visual effects artists because Marvel has not been treating them well, and it's really shown when some of the VFX are really bad because they were rushed to do it. And Phase 4 didn't feel like it had an overall story arc like the previous phases. Like Phase 1 led into the Avengers, Phase 2 led into Avengers Age of Ultron, introducing us to Guardians for Infinity War, and introducing Ant-Man for Civil War. And then Phase 3, it led us to Infinity War and Endgame. So it led us to all these big Avenger-based movies, but Phase 4 did none of that. It just introduced us to the multiverse pretty much, and then some street-level heroes, which we'll be getting more of in Phase 5. So Phase 4 felt like kind of an interlude phase, where it's kind of introducing us to a bunch of characters, but not really doing a big story arc like they did before. They pretty much split the MCU in this phase as well, where like each character was doing their own thing rather than connecting, which again, not everything needs to connect, but I think with at least big events, they should reference it in a later movie, which is also why I think there was a problem with the pandemic and people not able to communicate with one another, and Kevin Feige being stretched too thin, where you can be like to Doctor Strange, hey, reference what happened in Eternals, just say something about the big freaking celestial sticking out of the ground, or something along the lines like that. Even like I was saying, for shows like Hawkeye could have referenced it on the news, so I'm glad She-Hulk had at least like a little blip, you blink and you miss it moment, saying that there's a giant celestial, well, statue sticking out of the sea. There's still stuff I wish they did better in it, but hey, hopefully we'll see more in Phase 5 and it get a lot better going forward. At least some of the stuff in Phase 4 was cool for character-wise. Like, we got introduced to Daredevil and Kingpin again. Kingpin's going to be a little bit more comic book accurate than he was before, a little bit more stronger than he was as well. And he gets his comic book accurate look. Daredevil looks fantastic. The acrobatics was on point, and I cannot wait for Daredevil Born Again, because that's going to be 24 episodes of pure joy. And it's going to be great, introducing us probably to a lot of street-level characters, and I'm really looking forward to that one. And then also introducing us to Abomination again with his comic book accurate look was great, and I wonder when we'll see him again. I'm still hoping that he's in the Thunderbolts. It makes more sense for him to be in the Thunderbolts than not, just saying. And then the subtle mutant references here and there, like Namor being a mutant. I still don't like the Kamala Khan one, but they reference her. And then She-Hulk having mutant characters without saying the word mutant. So that is always cool, where they're setting up the stages for the later phases. It just felt, like I said before, this feels like an interlude. It feels like they're setting up stuff. It's not really going anywhere, but I'm sure we'll see all that go somewhere in the next phases. We just have to wait a little bit to get there. But going into Phase 5, we learned some good things. Like the news article came out stating that Marvel executives and stuff aren't happy with Phase 4 and how it went. They want to produce quality over quantity, and have more quality control so they can make sure everything they're putting out is good and people don't bitch and complain. And the fact that some of our projects may be being pushed back and delayed now, but honestly, I would rather that happen and stuff be done better than not at all. Because now they want to develop some creative oversight. They also want to have fixed the CGI complaints. So that's, at least we know it's going in the right direction and it's not going to be complete and utter shit. So hopefully this means better projects, stuff won't feel rushed, characters will feel like they're actually continuing their storyline. Thor is a good example of that, because even Chris Hemsworth has come out and said that he wants to change Thor's tone a little bit more going into the future, because he wasn't happy with how Love and Thunder turned out as well. I really hope that the MCU does go in the right direction going forward into Phase 5 and 6, because some of the movies in Phase 5 and 6 are going to be really cool and good. I'm really looking forward to Captain America 4. I'm really looking forward to Thunderbolts. I can't wait for Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Secret Wars better not be a letdown. It's way too big to be a movie, and I'm kind of worried about that. However, I have a feeling they have something up their sleeves, because we don't know what's happening in Phase 6 yet. We only know so much. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of the new phases and what kind of storyline they're going to set up, because I feel like Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania is going to be setting up Kang, and then that's going to start setting the stage for Kang Dynasty. Really looking forward to it. Cannot wait to see where it goes. We all have our criticisms with Phase 4, so let me know down in the comments what were some of yours, what you liked about Phase 4, and really how you felt about this phase overall. What you're looking forward to in Phase 5 and 6, because I really want to hear other people's opinions, because we all have different opinions when it comes to things like this. Thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you later, and let's hope that Phase 5 is going to be a good one.